Good morning, everybody. It is Fallen Officer Week, and this whole week they're back in DC and doing all the ceremonies and things. Sunday, which was Mother's Day, was also the 10th anniversary of my son, Sergeant Brandon Mendoza, being killed on his way home from work from the Mesa, Arizona Police Department. So, and that was an illegal, this was back in 2014, an illegal who moved to Arizona from Colorado because he had been convicted of crimes in Colorado and ended up not showing up for court. And then they caught him, I believe it was in 2002, coming back over the border from Mexico after having gone home to visit his family. They took him back up to Adams County, Colorado, had him appear before a judge, and basically the judge just gave him a slap on the wrist and said, behave yourself. And he ultimately ended up here in Arizona. And so the day that he killed my son, he had been drinking pretty heavily and was going and fighting with his wife and going from his wife's house to his brother's house, continually drinking, doing meth. And everybody just kept letting him get the keys and get in the car and leave from one house to the other. He ended up on the freeway and was going the wrong way in the HOV lane. He ended up going over 35 miles the wrong way and actually transitioned from one freeway to another. And then he was transitioning onto a third different freeway, still in the HOV lane, when he met my son on a blind curve. My son was on his way home from work. And this illegal was at that point going about 100 miles an hour. 104 to be exact is where his speedometer was frozen after the accident. But they had more than, I don't know how many calls, from 911 calls from people saying this idiot's going to kill somebody, get somebody out here. And after, things settled, it was quite a process for me because I didn't know he was an illegal to begin with for quite a while until after the funeral and everything cleared, because they were pretty much keeping that from me. And of course, the media was definitely keeping it from us here in Arizona. And the police department definitely was keeping it from us. I mean, the illegal was killed in the accident himself, so there weren't going to be any criminal charges or that sort of thing happening to where, this was important information about the guy. But still, 10 years ago, they were still trying to cover up the amount of crimes. Not still, but they were covering up the amount of crimes that illegals were committing in this country. And it's happening more and more now. And I've talked about it on the show, and all these articles that I get from my research assistant, it's, a Gainesville man, a Mesa man, a Gilbert man, a Miami man. And then as you read further into the article, then you realize, oh, he's an illegal from Venezuela. He's an illegal from Cuba. And this is absolutely necessary information for people to know. I think that it should be in the headline. And they should all start out like, another illegal alien assaulted a woman in Miami, Florida. Another illegal alien. They all need to start out like that. Because if that was the case, and if they brought attention to every single crime that they're committing, how much would that affect people in this country? But beyond that, it's extra notification to people, especially if they keep hearing their town or surrounding cities and towns are being hit by continual illegal crime. They'll understand, hey, these people are moving into our area. We need to be a little more cautious. That's, I think, the false sense of security that a lot of Americans have right now. They don't think that it, I look outside my house and there isn't, there's no sign of illegal aliens, camping out or causing crime or knocking people over. You go to downtown Mesa, you don't see them walking along. You're not afraid to walk along downtown Mesa in front of the shops and go down there and get something to eat. I don't know that this sort of thing has started happening in downtown Phoenix, but it definitely is something that is going to be moving across the country, folks, because as these illegals in these larger cities start having their freebies taken away from them, the free hotels, the free food, the free, Visa cards, the free whatever, then they're going to start dispersing throughout the United States in the search of something, of easier victims, of small towns that they can easily just go through, steal, go to the next one, do what they need to do to survive. Or, if some of them who are actually here to look for a job, if they're out looking for jobs and try and find one, they'll keep moving until they find one that suits their needs. But I'll touch on this and then I want to get back to my son. But I was reading an article yesterday where this young man from Cuba came. He came up through San Diego and was working as a dishwasher and ended up saying, I posted it on Facebook on, let me see. Oh, let me pull the article up. Here it is. Excuse me, because I got to look through. I mean, my research woman sends me tons and tons and tons. And so I got to go back to this. But this article talks about how he came from Cuba and he couldn't get a job. Oh, here it is. No. He couldn't get a job any better than washing dishes. And so he's from Cuba and that was a different one. Dang it. I want to find this because it's pretty interesting. Maybe I can find it here on my phone. And the reason I want to read this to you is because it's so important for these type of people to go back to their hometowns, their home countries, and tell them that this isn't any good. This isn't any good, because I'm sorry. Oh, sorry about this. Okay. The young man who complained about scrubbing pots in the United States returns to Cuba. So he's 25 years old. And let me stop the video. And
if advanced lung cancer has you searching for possibilities,
ads on these articles. He affirms that life in the United States is not what it is portrayed to be, that the jobs available are terrible, and that there is no time to socialize. Poor guy. I guess he thought he was just going to come here and, be handed $40 an hour and could just sit around and smoke pot and hang out with his friends. A Cuban who in February, he complained about having to work scrubbing pots in the United States and assured that in Cuba, he had everything. He has finally returned to his country, and he sent a message to Cyber Cuba with photos taken at the Havana airport announcing that he was back on the island. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So he had everything in Cuba. So why'd you come here? Why'd you come here? I'll tell you why. Because this administration, the United Nations, and the NGOs are promising these people the world. They're paying them to come. They're enticing them to come. If this young man had everything in Cuba, What did they tell him was going to happen when he came to the United States for him to leave everything behind? And this is what is so pervasive and evil about these NGOs, the United Nations, the one world government actors, players. This is what is so bad about them, that they don't care what they do to people's lives, uproot them. However he ended up getting here, however much money he ended up paying, however badly he was treated along the way. They don't care about that. And they sure as heck don't care if they're a woman or a young girl. They know they're going to get raped, especially if they have to come up through the Darien Gap. Here's the other thing I found out. That the United Nations and the United States are both paying for that bridge right before, as you're coming up to get into Panama, to go through the Darien Gap to get up to South America, or into Mexico, excuse me. The United Nations and the United States are paying to have a bridge built there. So there's a pretty wide river that you have to get across as you're coming from Colombia to get up into Panama. And there's a pretty wide river there. But now the locals there, they have these long boats. And of course, they're making a great living now because they're charging everybody who gets on their boats to get across that river. They're charging them money. So they have found a way to make a living and benefit off of illegal immigration. But now the United Nations and the United States are coming in and saying, you know what? We're going to build a nice big bridge so people can just walk across this river, walk on this bridge and get across it. Pretty soon, there's going to be a paved road that these smugglers are going to be able to put big trucks and put all these people in the back of them and drive them through the Darien Gap. If you don't know what the Darien Gap is, look it up. Google it. It was a pristine jungle. And what sickens me is that the environmentalists and the Green New Deal people, I mean, this is pristine jungle. You know, we all know what trees do. You need trees. And they're not down there causing a stink. This illegal alien invasion has cut a swath through the Darien Gap that is littered by miles and miles of trash. If you ever haven't looked at Ben Berquam, Berquam, on Facebook and on Instagram, he's got tons of videos. He's actually gone through the Darien Gap as a true liberal or a true conservative journalist, I think 4 times. But he has actual raw footage there in the Darien Gap, and it's clothes and it's backpacks and it's used condoms and more used condoms and more used condoms and more used condoms. It's and women's underwear. It's disgusting, the things that he came across in this jungle. He also told me, because he was on my podcast a while ago, he also told me that they were with military men from, I don't know if it was from Colombia or from Panama, but they were going with them through the Darien Gap because it's that dangerous. And he said that, yeah, they tell them that these groups of militants come out of the jungle and grab all the women in the group, and there's nothing the men can do because the militants are holding all the men, you know, at gunpoint, and they just rip these women and young girls off into the jungle and rape them. There's nothing they can do. And this is why all these NGOs, before they actually go into the Darien Gap, they have this little city where, you know, you pay for your boat tickets and all that kind of stuff, but they sell all this stuff. And Ben was walking through that little place too. And they actually have stands where they give out free rape kits to women. So I don't know if it's the morning after pill or you know what. So here these women have not only been raped in the jungle, but now take this morning after pill that's going to make you cramped. It's going to make you bleed. And you're going to have to deal with that while traipsing through the jungle too. And the United Nations and the George Soros backed NGOs and the United States backed NGOs and the One World Order backed NGOs and all these evil players, nobody cares what's happening to these people. It's a self-made humanitarian crisis encouraged by Joe Biden, by Kamala Harris, by Chuck Schumer, by all those yahoos in Congress who won't do anything about shutting this down and forcing our president to do something. And every single one of them, I'm sorry, there's landscapers across the street and so my dogs hear them. So in essence, when these illegal criminals end up coming here, being let in across our border, the very people who won't stop it are the ones who have blood on their hands. Mayorkas, Biden, every member of Congress who votes in a way to not stop this insanity from happening at our borders. It's so wrong. Anyway, going back to my son and police week and stuff, it's really kind of sad. The city of Mesa put up a very nice tribute. They had the fallen officer memorial event last Wednesday, it's always beautiful and nice. But they also put up on Sunday a nice memorial about Brandon and on their Facebook, on their social media. And I was looking through some of the comments and it just broke my heart because I mean, I knew my son was a kind and generous and loving man. I knew this, but I didn't know a lot of what he was doing out in the community. So here's one comment. Brandon lives on in the community he served. He was appreciated by so many within the Guerrero Park community, and his commitment to the community he served was exemplary. He is missed but not forgotten. Another one. I had the honor to work with Brandon and will forever cherish my memories of him. He was an amazing person and police officer. Thank you, Officer Mendoza. I remember seeing him come to the Boys and Girls Club down the street from Guerrero Park. I lived in the area for many years. He is one of the main reasons I decided to become a police officer. Rest in peace, and thank you for your service and sacrifice. Really an amazing person, so missed. Let me see, there's a few others. Tragic day for all involved. He was such an amazing human. I went to high school with him and would see him at the courts when he was with animal control or there on a case when he was a cop. Always would say hi if we saw each other. Rest in peace, Sergeant Mendoza. A man loved and missed to all at Mesa PD. We were touched by his presence and miss him. My thoughts are with you. End of watch is a never-ending scenario for the families. The family forever has a huge hole that is never filled. The families are blessed that the Mesa PD never forgets. Such a kind man, hard to believe 10 years has passed. My thoughts and prayers go out to his mother. Anniversaries are always tough. He was a great man. I got to know Brandon pretty well as I live on McDonald. McDonald is a street that runs there by Guerrero Park, the area that he went in and revitalized. He did so much good for our neighborhood. One of my dogs got out one time and he found him and brought him home to me. I'm glad I got to know him. May he rest in peace. The world lost a great man that day. May his friends and family be able to find the peace they need. And the comments just went on and on and on. So this is the tribute that the Mesa Police Department put up, which I thought was really, really nice. Good picture of my boy. So the guy who talked about Brandon finding his dog, Brandon, of course, was a big animal lover, of course, working in animal control before he actually went to the police academy. But he got to know everybody in this neighborhood where he was assigned. There was a park in the middle of the neighborhood, Guerrero Park, that was overrun by gang members, by drug addicts, by homeless people, and nobody in that neighborhood would go down and use this park. So he decided that he had been back to Chicago and had talked to a cop friend back there on vacation. And that guy was talking to Brandon about old beat cops and how he misses those days because he was an older cop back there in Chicago. And Brandon came back and I remember him telling me, I'm going to be a beat cop, Mom. This guy just really like lit the fire in me. And this is like the kind of cop I want to be. I want to know people. I want, the area that I'm patrolling to depend on me, to know they can trust me. So when he got assigned to this park detail, he ended up going door to door and knocking on every single door of the people who lived in that area, introduced himself, told them what he was going to be doing. And he knew which dogs belonged in which yard. He knew these people. And that's why he was able to take that dog that he found back to the guy who lost him, because he knew what yard it belonged in. But he also knew there were elderly people living in the neighborhood, and he knew their medical conditions because their sons and daughters who maybe lived in Phoenix or, Scottsdale or someplace would come and visit with them. And he knew what was going on with them medically, and he had their kids' numbers, and different times he would check in on them on his rounds when he was out there. And if something was distressing this individual medically, he would get a hold of their children. They'd rush right over and handle the situation. He also went over and above because really he was set with the task of revitalizing that park, getting the homeless out of there, getting the drug addicts out of there. And it came with some help from the neighborhood also, because he needed their help if they had information on these people who were down there doing this sort of thing. It was really a sad park when Brandon went down there and started working on it. Needles, the tables with the cover, Ramada's covering them for picnics and stuff. They were just packed with all these homeless people with backpacks and bikes, and they'd all sitting all over the tables and smoking crack and doing their thing. And if you went to the far south side of the park, there was a wall, like it came out to a parking lot, but there was a block wall. And then there was about a gap, probably about this wide, between the block wall on the side of the park to the block wall of a house, the back end of a house that was in the neighborhood. And the homeless people started using that little slot as a bathroom, because they had bathrooms there in the park, but they started locking them up because they were going in there late at night and shooting up and going in there and having sex and God knows what else was going on inside those bathrooms. So the city started locking them up at dusk. So these people started using this little area as a bathroom. And I talked to one of the officers after Brandon had passed away, because I was really kind of distressed when I went by there, probably 2.5 years after Brandon had passed away, and the park was really deteriorating. And so I went in and talked to his lieutenant, who's now the police chief at Mesa, And I said, whoa, 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 what is happening? It's reverting back to where it was. And all this hard work that Brandon did, you guys are just allowing to go by the wayside, and you're letting the bad guys win by getting this park back. And so I went out there with the guy who was good. They were going to be putting on patrol in that area. And he showed me this little slot between these block walls. And I mean, they would take the feces and just smear it on the wall. I mean, it stunk to high heaven back there. I can't even imagine what those poor people whose fence backed up to it from their yard. Can't imagine what they smelt or what they witnessed or what they had to deal with. But they got it cleaned up again. And then I think it was at the 5-year mark, I met a reporter down there to talk about my son, the 5-year anniversary. And as we're sitting at one of the tables, I look off into the grass, and there's a syringe right there off the table where probably a family was going to picnic, that weekend. So I called the police department, and I waited there after the reporter left, didn't bring her eyes to it. But the minute the police officer got there, I showed it to him. And so he came in and picked it up. This is a park where children play, and these drug addicts just leave these syringes laying around it. It's just so disgusting. And how they take over parks and areas that families would love to go to, but families start avoiding, and then they give up control of their lives and their neighborhood fun and their parks. They give up control of it to these people because that's just easier to do than cause a scene, or easier to do than to call the police department, who in some cases, in some cities and towns, they don't care about it. That isn't a priority to them. Could you imagine the New York Police Department getting a call from somebody saying there's a homeless person camped out in this park doing drugs? That would be the last call that they would go to that day, because of all the assaults that are happening in downtown New York City. But anyway, so in the middle of this park then is a baseball field. And Brandon had been working really hard to get some dugouts put in, get a new backstop, get new lighting, and then, was going to have a big grand opening of the baseball field again, because there's like a rotating schedule of the parks in Mesa that these kids go to play Little League and that type of thing. And so this was one of the parks that was involved in that, but it was pretty embarrassing, for the people in that neighborhood whose kids played baseball and stuff, for all these other parents to come to their park, because it was in pretty bad shape. Brandon got all new playground equipment put in there, and all new that rubberized kind of pellets down so the kids wouldn't injure themselves. And after he passed away, he had new cameras put up in the park, security cameras. And after he passed away, they actually went in there and ended up putting a sticker on the camera that has his badge number, so that the kids know Brandon's always looking over them. And they ended up there was a big petition going around, because everybody who lived in that neighborhood wanted it renamed the Brandon Mendoza Park, because the Guerrero family, who it was named after, really had lost interest in the park and really wasn't doing anything, to make sure it was kept up in the family's honor. But as soon as they heard word that, they wanted to rename it after Brandon, oh man, they started showing up to things. And the interesting thing is, we know that family. Our family knew that family. But anyway, they ultimately ended up naming the ball field in the middle of the park Mendoza Field, after Brandon, in his honor. So that's a great tribute to him right there. It's on the south side of town, and right up the street from there is the Boys and Girls Club and Mesa Arts Academy. So a lot of these kids and the Boys and Girls Club and the Mesa Arts Academy share an auditorium, and they share a kitchen, a very ill-equipped kitchen. It's the Grant Woods Boys and Girls Club, and Grant Woods was a politician here in Arizona, a very wealthy man. I think he's still around. But I was really sending a lot of letters to the board after Brandon died, because Brandon would have an annual Thanksgiving dinner at the Boys and Girls Club for the neighborhood before he passed away. So after he passed away, for about 4 or 5 years, I kept that tradition up and had the Thanksgiving dinner there. But unbelievable how this school had to deal with a kitchen that I don't even know how they cooked meals in there, honestly. These women were miracle makers. They didn't even have a stove. They had these ovens, and they had a walk-in refrigerator, but unless the school district was bringing, lunches to them to serve, that's the only way that I can imagine that was happening. But the facility was really run down. I really was imploring Grant Woods and the board to do some improvements, do a fundraiser, and get this taken care of. Here's the funny thing, and this is politics, folks. This is just the way society and people are. So Grant Woods hadn't been over there. The board members really hadn't been over there, hadn't shown any interest, in knowing anything about this. Well, when Brandon passed away and I kept doing the Thanksgiving dinners, the news stations would come over there at that time. I don't know how they ever found out. It was probably the guy who ran the Boys and Girls Club would let them know, but they would show up at the dinner. And of course, they wanted to talk to us. Well, lo and behold, the Grant Woods Boys and Girls Club board members started showing up. And of course, they wanted to talk to the reporters. And I just thought, what have you done and why are you here? Especially at this event, Brandon did more for those kids than the board members did. It was insane. But I had started the Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Memorial Foundation. And so we started kicking in and helping with backpacks for the kids for back to school, with scholarships for the kids to be able to go to the Boys and Girls Club after they were at our school day there at the Mesa Arts Academy. They just transferred over to the Boys and Girls Club until their parents were able to pick them up from school. So it was an after school program for them. Some of the playground equipment was broken. And so I got the pieces and the parts that were needed to repair all the playground equipment in my son's honor. And those were the types of things that we were doing. And I was really trying to make it nice for the people. And we would have tons of turkeys donated because I would put it out there. I need turkeys donated. It was a struggle to find a place to cook all these turkeys because you couldn't cook them there. They didn't have the proper ovens. And things just started like going off the rails. I was making sure that I had like $25 gift cards for grocery stores, and we would have a drawing. Everybody would get a ticket when they came in to eat dinner. And I probably gave away 10 of those grocery card gift certificates in a drawing. I had other things that were donated. And we had Village Inn donate all the pies, pumpkin pies, that type of thing. We had Lone Star Steakhouse donating like the vegetables, and other places donating. Lone Star donated the mashed potatoes and gravy too. And then we had other places. I think the only thing I had to buy was rolls. We even had the VFW and different places donate and cook our turkeys for us. But one year we got such a huge amount of turkeys, and I wanted to be able to take those turkeys and go get some other essentials and add them to them and take them to the doors of people that I knew were very needy, because we would have our Thanksgiving dinner the week before Thanksgiving, just as a community gathering. And then, with those gift cards, back in the day, $25 could buy you a turkey. But I found out that the Boys and Girls Club, the man who ran it, was just giving those away to other Boys and Girls Clubs. And that isn't what I wanted done. So I was really upset. And then I started really opening my eyes and watching. And I couldn't believe the way people were dressed. So as word got out and it was on the news, people were showing up from all over the place and dressed to the nine, and all the kids had cell phones, and they would take a plate of food and go sit down and maybe take a bite or two and throw it in the garbage. They were all there for the gift card giveaways. This is where society really makes me mad, because Brandon started this with the goodness of his heart, that he wanted it to be something that would benefit a community that needed help. And outsiders started coming in and turning it into something that it was never intended to be. This past week, I think it was on Friday or Saturday, one of the local TV stations did an interview with a teacher, and she was speaking about Brandon, and because he was a resource officer and would show up at a lot of these schools too, and the kids all loved him. And she was talking about how the kids loved him and she misses him so much. He was such a great officer, such a great attitude. And they talked about it in there too, where he brought she had left school early one day, but he ended up with a couple of the officers that he got involved in. They spent money and had some things donated, but they took a bunch of Christmas presents to her school for the needy kids who weren't going to have any. They weren't going to have a Christmas because their families couldn't afford it. The other thing that Brandon kind of started up was the shop with the cop. He got Target, and he used to work at Target as a security guard. So he got them to agree to let him bring a couple kids in and go shopping, which I thought was pretty cool. That he started that up here with the Mesa Police Department. And a lot of times he would spend his own money. When he passed away in May, found it out from the police department that he had actually bought 3 bicycles for 3 grandchildren who were living with their grandparents in the Guerrero Park area because both of their parents were in prison. And Brandon kind of took them under his wing. So he'd already bought bikes for them. And so I went ahead and took some of the money that was donated to the Brandon Mendoza Memorial Foundation and bought some more Christmas gifts for these kids, talked to the grandmother, found out what they needed. And then we went over there. Not that year. That year, they just went ahead and took care of it themselves. Didn't even let me know that they were doing that. But the following 2 years, I made sure that those kids had a great Christmas. And I'm actually thinking about resurrecting the Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Memorial Foundation, because it's kind of just been dormant. When I stopped doing the Thanksgiving dinners and stopped really partnering up with the Boys and Girls Club with some of the crazy things that were happening. And I want to resurrect it. I want to do something for Christmas for those families in that neighborhood. I think it's important to keep that tradition going. Those people loved him. And he loved them. He loved all the mothers in there, because he loved it at Christmas time, because he would say that he would get invited in for tamales when they were making tamales, or, a good Mexican meal. The mothers would say, "Come in and eat, Officer Mendoza, we have tamales," or, certain words would catch his ears, and he'd have to get out of his car and go in and see what was going on. So anyway, I just wanted to share some of my son with you and why it's so difficult for me. A lot of people, I think, wonder, my dog has put her ball underneath the couch, which she loves to do when I'm doing my podcast. So we're going to have a fuss here for a while, because I'm not getting up. But he just, I don't even remember what I was saying. Anyway, Brandon was the kind of guy that just did things because he knew that it would matter. And one of the things that really tugged at my heartstring was when I was at the Boys and Girls Club, and this was probably about 6 months after Brandon had been killed. This young boy came up to me and he said, "Mrs. Mendoza, who's going to play kickball and buy us pizza now?" And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, what is this about? Well, come to find out, on his days off if he had Saturday or Sunday off, usually it was Saturdays, he would go down to the park in the area. And of course, all it took was 1 or 2 kids for him to see and say, "Come on, we're going to play kickball." And the kids would spread out, go get other kids, bring them back to the park, and Brandon would have a big kickball game with them. And then afterwards, he would either go get a pizza or go get them ice cream, bring it back to the park, and then he would hand it out to all of them. So great memories with those kids. And he fostered in them the importance of staying out of trouble and staying in school and living a good life. And he inspired many young men in that neighborhood to become police officers, as one of them commented on the City of Mesa tribute to him. So very proud of my son. It's very hard for me to not ever keep him in my memory. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people are like, well, gosh, it's been 10 years and you still act like it was yesterday. Well, to me, it was. You know, he was an important part of my family. I would feel that way about any one of my kids if I lost them. And you really can't say what you would do unless you were really standing in that person's shoes. So I think it's important to keep his memory alive. I think it's important to talk about him. I am amazed how my grandchildren remember him, because a lot of them were quite young. 10 years ago, you know, my 18-year-old granddaughter was 8, and she posted some videos that she has of Brandon got this convertible car. She's driving in the convertible with him, and she's got her sweatshirt on backwards because it's cold. He had the top down, and he's playing Justin Bieber songs for her, and they're singing, and the wind's blowing through her hair. And I just think, and she remembers every bit of that. You know, he would have his nieces over to his house for a spend the night, and he would put face masks and take pictures of them all and just do fun things, take them to Target. And one time, Madison was really young, and she wanted those press-on nails. So he got her the press-on nails, and they were sitting in the little area there in Target where you could get pizza or food or stuff. And she was tapping her fingers on the table, looking down, because it was making the clickety-clack sound when you got nails on. And he was laughing as he's filming it and putting it on Facebook. He just loved spending time with his nieces and nephews because they brought the kid out in him. And he was always a kid at heart, you know. You're just gonna have to wait, Bella Boo. So those are the kinds of things that I don't ever want to forget about him. His nieces and nephews will never forget. You know, we'd be making Christmas cookies, and Brandon would show up with boxes and boxes of pizza, and the kids would all scream and run over and wrap their arms around him and thank him. And of course, he had to critique all their Christmas cookie decorating that they had done that year. At Halloween time, I have a pretty big patio, covered patio, and the grandkids would all come over, and we'd have a pumpkin carving contest. And big overhead lights on, you know, while they were carving, and then we'd get them all done. And then Brandon was usually working the night that we had that going on, and we'd let him know that when they were all done and when we had candles in them. So we had them all lined up on the edge of the patio, and he would come and go out in the yard. We had to turn all the lights off, and he would judge them all. And then he would take his police flashlight, and we had to play crazy music. And then the kids would all be dancing on the patio, and he would be flashing his flashlight. And so I had videos of that. And of course, it's crazy because, you know, one minute you'll see the kid, the next you wouldn't with the flashlight. But everything he did with his nieces and nephews made him crack up. They remember it all. And it just makes me sad sometimes when I see families that don't have this. That's why it was so hard to lose Brandon, because he was the crazy uncle. He was the, you know, extra loving son. He was the adventurer. He was a glue that held his brothers and his sister together, you know, with the squabbles and things that went on. Brandon would always be the level-headed one. Of course, he was a little crazy when I was going through the academy. He loved to come home and be talking to his sister and flip her around and handcuff her hands behind her back and then throw her down on the ground so she couldn't get up. He also did a lot of crazy stuff like that. And then, of course, he challenged his 2 older brothers that he could do that to them. And it was pretty funny when he was left lying on the ground with cuffs around his hands behind his back. Mr. Police Academy is what they would call him then, harass him. But Always big and bold, even in junior high when he went to the prom. In junior high, it wasn't even high school. He got all his buddies in to go in together and rent a limo. So in 8th grade, they had a limo rented, and parents didn't drive them all. The limo driver came and got them all and took them to their junior high prom. And what was funny, all of his friends, when they were over at the house a couple weeks later, they were all betting that by senior prom, Brandon would have a helicopter. He would drive his girlfriend out to the airport and Falcon Field and get in a helicopter and land on the high school football field and come to the senior prom like that, which, if he'd have been able to pull that off, he probably would have. But always an adventure. And Brendan and I traveled a lot together. We went to Hawaii many times together. He was an avid photographer, which I was too at a point in my life. So that was something we had in common. Loved to travel up to the mountains. He went to Europe and met this really sweet girl from Canada, Antoinette Wu, and she ended up coming to Arizona quite a bit. She became a very good friend of his, and he made friends wherever he went. I mean, I couldn't believe, he'd go to Chicago a lot. He loved Chicago. And of course, this was 15 years ago when things were a little better there. But he loved traveling, that adventurous spirit of his. And the year that he was killed, he had a trip set for July of that year to go to Chicago. But he was really pushing for his friends. He wanted to go in March. It was March or April. He was hell-bent on getting to Chicago. He didn't want to wait till July, and they were going to go again in July because he already had plane tickets and hotel reservations. But he ended up getting a smaller group together and went to Chicago in March, I believe it was. But I almost feel like maybe he felt that sense of urgency that he needed to go, that something was going to happen to him. We never know, right? But I'm so thankful that he did the traveling that he did, that he had the adventures and the friends that he did, and that he got the job that he knew at the age of like 14 that that's what he wanted to do, was to become a police officer. And a lot of his friends were kind of pissed off at him during high school, because in high school he wouldn't go to parties, he wouldn't go out drinking, he wouldn't do any of that crazy stuff that you do in high school, because he told his friends, I don't want to be at the wrong place at the wrong time because I'm going to be a police officer. And he held true to that. And so, everything he did, I was just amazed. And the pranks that this boy could pull, oh my goodness sakes. I got to tell you all. So, it was when my son, who's in the Army, him and his wife and family were coming through. They were on their way to Germany. They were being stationed in Germany. And they were here for a limited amount of time. And so I was having dinner here at the house on a Monday night. And I told Brandon, I'm like, you're going to need to come to the house for dinner tonight. And he's like, no, I have Monopoly Monday martini night at my house on Mondays. And I'm like, oh, for goodness sakes, Brandon. I said, how often is Jared in town? You need to just cancel this Mondays and, have it next Monday. Nope. Everybody's coming over already. So I'll just see him tomorrow and whatever. So I tell them, and we're all getting ready for dinner. And the kids had some Nerf guns. Jared's boys and the other grandkids, they were having Nerf gun wars. So my two oldest sons, my daughter, her husband, and Jared's husband, or Jared's wife, they got all the Nerf guns, got bandanas to put around their face. Well, actually, no, they didn't do it that time. They got the Nerf No. Let me take this back. They had some of those confetti eggs is what they had. So the girls knocked on Brandon's door. Martini Monopoly Monday night was going on. Knocked on his door. He opened the door and they're like, hey, we thought we'd come over here since you wouldn't come over to mom's. And he's like, hey, well, where's the guys? And they're like, oh, they ran up to the store to get some beer. And he's like, all right. So the girls made sure that they left the door unlocked. So they went in and we're sitting around talking. Well, the guy snuck in and they had the confetti eggs and they ran in the house, smashed the confetti eggs on Brandon's head and all of his friends' head, grabbed Brandon's 2 dogs. No, he only had 1 dog then. Grabbed Brandon's dog, Heidi, his little dachshund, and got into the car and came home. So the mayhem, and they were shooting him with the Nerf guns. They did have the guns too. So the mayhem of all of that, Brandon called. He didn't even realize his dog was gone. So they started taking pictures of Heidi with a bandana around her eyes and a Nerf gun to her head. And they're like, if you don't listen to our demands, this is what's going to happen. Anyway, this was going on back and forth. We were waiting for Brandon to show up here and do something to us, which we ended up going to bed. I heard something in the middle of the night, looked out the front window, but everybody was crashed. I mean, all my grandkids were here, kids, spouses, and I looked out front and they were silly stringing. Anyway, we get up the next morning. They had put glitter all over my driveway. They put silly string and wrote stuff all over our car windshields. They had toilet paper in the front yard. And then Brandon, thinking that we were going to come back and retaliate that night, went home and took string and put it back and forth across his driveway with beer cans on it so that if anybody tried to drive up in his driveway, it would rattle all those cans and he'd hear. Well, we never went over there that night. So we waited a few days and Brandon was at work. And so we went over to his house. His roommate let us in and we completely Post-it noted his whole bedroom walls. Post-it notes at every inch. We saran wrapped his toilet. We put foil around his pillows and put his pillowcases back on. We put confetti all over his ceiling fan blades so that when he went into his room and turned on the ceiling fan, the confetti went everywhere. And oh my gosh, he was so mad. And his roommate was so sweet, was waiting at the door, talking to him, and started filming him when he turned on the light and the confetti started going all around the room. He ended up coming back to my house and getting me back during a Sunday brunch that I was having for him and his friends. As we were all out on the patio, Brandon came in the house and him and another friend said they had to leave. Well, they did a whole trail of confetti all over my couches, all over my kitchen counters, down my hallway, and all over my bed. That took me about 4 hours with the shop vacs to clean up. But this is the kind of craziness that went on. And so Jared sent me this beautiful nutcracker from Germany. And I know this is probably a boring podcast to you guys, but oh well, I'm talking about my son. He sent me this beautiful nutcracker from Germany. And I knew it would just bug Brandon to death. So I took it to work with me and I was taking pictures of it at work in my cubicle. And I said, take your favorite son's Christmas present to work day. And then I was like, taking pictures of it, like tucked in the guest bedroom bed and reading the newspaper, was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, this was driving Brandon mad. So when I was at work, he came and got the nutcracker and kidnapped the nutcracker. And then he was taking pictures of it over his fish tank, that this guy's going to go for a swim if you don't come up with the demands. So it started making all these demands on me. I had to do a public apology on social media that, he's my favorite son, not Jared or Raymond. Then he was demanding that I send that I make soft snickerdoodle cookies, which was a huge challenge for me. But I finally found it. I had to meet him in a Starbucks parking lot. He pulled up next to me, rolled down his window about this far, had sunglasses and gloves on, grabbed the plate, and he said, "You'll hear from me in 24 hours. Anyway, this was the kind of relationship we had. It was fun. he was fun. He was an amazing man. He was an amazing brother and grandson. He loved my mom. And anyway, I can't remind you all enough. Hug your children. Tell them you love them. You can't tell them enough. And if you have a squabble, get over it. This life is too short and you never know what's going to happen and who's going to be taken away from you and when. It can happen like that. Nothing I was expecting to happen to me. So God bless. We'll see you tomorrow. And I hope you have a great evening.